We are back, and we are joined now by Will Sommer, senior reporter at the Bulwark and author of the False Flag newsletter. Will, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. So you have been across some of the right-wing reaction to obviously the killing of Charlie Kirk over on False Flag. We were saying this briefly in the break. I hesitate to talk about splits in the Republican base sometimes because they're much better at kind of, putting those things aside and coming behind their dear leader, Donald Trump. But it appears like, at least really with like the young online right-wing space, the reaction to the killing of Charlie Kirk has caused some rancor between, these media personalities that feels like it's building off of like existing fissures really around the issue of Israel.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think fundamentally here, there's kind of a frustration from a lot of these figures that the shooter, or excuse me, the suspect has not been like, I don't know, a member of DSA, is not like
Yes.
really visibly, and certainly is not trans himself. Like they really wanted like a blue hair SJW type. And then it's a lot more muddled. I think there's a lot of questions remaining. And so instead, they sort of seem to be turning to a lot of conspiracy theories. And as you said, I mean, Israel is kind of like the main fault line, particularly for young Trump supporters or youngish. And so as a result, I think this idea that Israel killed him or that there are a lot of sort of unanswered questions about what happened has really been proliferating.
And who are the main purveyors of this? Because Candace Owens is the obvious answer, but we have figures like Tucker Carlson who have been much more critical of Israel from the right than the more traditional party, I guess, influencers. Although it's not necessarily taking a ton of a toll, at least in polling as of last month, in regards to the Republican base. It's certainly not like they're not as pro-Israel as they were, say, 2 years ago. But overwhelmingly, the cohort of voters, Democrats, independents, and Republicans, the Republican base is the one that's most supportive of Israel by like 50 or 40 points.
Yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally what's happening here is you have these sort of more Israel critical voices. And I mean, in Candace Owens' case, like sort of wildly anti-Semitic
Right,
as
exactly.
well. And so in the right wing media, and so Tucker and Candace, I think, would be sort of the leading avatars of that. And they are realizing, I think, that Charlie Kirk's memory is going to be something really valuable going forward to sort of a plethora of right wing causes and what that means. And so, for example, so Tucker was on the sort of JD Vance hosted Charlie Kirk show, and he said, essentially, I'm sick of Benjamin Netanyahu talking about Charlie Kirk and Israel and saying, oh, he was such a great supporter of Israel. And then Candace Owens, who is sort of setting herself as sort of a bizarro heir to Charlie Kirk, because she's not going to be allowed to take over Turning Point USA, stuff like that. But she's trying to sort of claim that mantle anyway. And so she put out a video basically saying that Charlie Kirk had a lot of tension with pro-Israel donors, that Bill Ackman, the billionaire, had confronted him over it. And she's not saying explicitly this is why he was killed, but it's sort of it sort of leads you to believe that there's sort of an insinuation there that, in the days up ahead of his death, there were these threats made to him.
Well, I would not be shocked if here it is. Here's your tweet response to this. Billionaire Bill Ackman says Candace Owens has slandered him with her claims this afternoon about tensions between Ackman and Charlie Kirk over Israel in the days leading up to Kirk's assassination. She did have a response where I think, she made a variety of different accusations, including an $150 million campaign that she says was going to be directed at Tucker Carlson for his critique of Israel. So, I don't believe any of these people, but I'm rooting for the fight.
Well, that's often the position I find myself in watching the fight. Yeah, I mean, I think it's tricky with Candace Owens because on one hand, she says things are totally nuts. Like, she's claimed that Brigitte Macron is not only trans, but is part of sort of a medieval cult that has traveled across Europe, undermining the underpinnings of Western civilization.
I'm sorry, trying not to laugh. Okay, go on. Yeah.
But at the same time,
Trans
occasionally
demon roaming across Europe. Anyway, keep going.
Exactly. And so, but we have to often sometimes like a figure like Laura Loomer, it's sort of, she can say things that are sort of like revealing about the internal dynamics hegemonics of the right and things that proved to be correct. So even before Charlie Kirk was shot, it was clear that there was some drama between him and some donors and some people on the right because he had this kind of gatekeeper role. And so if you were invited to speak at Turning Point USA, much more so than CPAC these days, which is sort of irrelevant, it meant like you were, okay, this is within Trumpism, you are a sanctioned figure. And as Tucker Carlson has become more critical of Israel and said sort of things about, I would apologize to the family of Osama bin Laden for the U.S. killing him, or, offer my condolences. People have been kind of panicking about the idea that he was going to be allowed to speak at a Turning Point convention, I believe in December. And so there was pressure on Charlie to block that. And now what Candace is saying is that that basically Bill Ackman had stepped up in a bigger way and said, we're going to have this event in the Hamptons, which, of course, that gets into a whole other thing about like how much money is flowing into this world. I mean, I know you guys at the Majority Report are always having your Hamptons retreats.
Obviously, Soros funded too.
And basically, she claims it was like 100 influencers were gathered there. And it was clearly in her saying, she's saying this was kind of the get in line, here's the line on Israel talking points. And basically that Ackman confronted Charlie and yelled at him. Ackman has denied that. And Turning Point USA and a bunch of kind of figures around it have come out to say that's not true. But this event did happen, but it was sort of on friendlier terms. So it's hard to know, but I do think it offers a glimpse into sort of the pressures and, again, the money that is behind Turning Point USA.
Well, I would not be shocked if that meeting did happen and it is as is characterized, given what we know about Benjamin Netanyahu. Actually, there has been reporting that he met with Dave Rubin and Tim Pool earlier this year. His son is a major fan of Tim Pool, and they are definitely concerned about the cratering support for Israel, given the fact that just this morning the UN said they are committing genocide in Gaza. It is completely it's undeniable at this point. And if you're a young person online and you're consuming more of those shows like Candace or Tucker versus, say, Fox News, you're going to be much more abreast of that fact, and you're going to see images of these children being slaughtered. And what Tucker and Candace have been doing is presenting an alternative narrative to the more humanist vision on the right. We've spoken about this on the show before, but like when our show talks about how we believe in a democratic Israel with Palestinians and Israelis having equal rights, what are they talking about? Oh, it's Israelis discriminating against Christian Palestinians, or it's Jews in America subverting our democracy because they support Israel. It's always pitting different groups against one another, and it feels like the influencers you're talking about are seizing on that opportunity in ways that, like, I think we should be very concerned about, because this is just what I think the left has spoken about, where when you conflate Zionism and Judaism, this is the eventual reality, and they are the outgrowth of that.
That's a great point, Emma. I mean, I do think that they are seizing on this, and certainly, someone like Nick Fuentes, who's even further right and more anti-Semitic, is they're seizing on this to say, look what the Jews are up to in Israel. I mean, it's not like these people are such bleeding hearts for Palestinian children,
right.
But they're saying, they're anti-Christian. Here's a video of, Jews in Israel like spitting on a visiting Christian tour group, and then they're saying, now look, if they have so much power there, and look how they use it. And then let's look at the United States, where we're going to say they control the media, they control everything here. Like, for example, they become really focused on like the idea of American politicians visiting the Western Wall, the idea that this is like an act of humiliation or some submission. So, I mean, it really is like they're using it to grow anti-Semitism and I think criticism of Jews in the United States. And it's very concerning. But I think you're right also that Netanyahu is clearly like very keyed into American influencer culture, right-wing influencers. I mean, at the point where you're meeting with Tim Pool, I mean, that's like a couple tiers down on the list. I mean, it's not a Fox News host. And so that's a big deal. And so I would not be surprised if both the Israeli government and supporters like Bill Ackman were really concerned about the prospect that someone like Charlie Kirk would even become neutral on Israel, that would start saying, voicing a few more criticisms. And in that way, you can see why they would be mad about that.
Right. But it's the causal connection being drawn by the right that is the problem here. And I find it interesting that that's where where some folks want to go. I mean, you have people immediately say on the right, the more traditional Republicans, even like Ben Shapiro went on Bill Maher's show and said this shooter was of the left, and Bill Maher of all people pushed back on him saying you don't know that, Ben. But that's the line from the Republican Party right now, without evidence, claiming that this shooter was ideologically left. And is that split like, pronounced among these right-wing kind of commentators as well? Because then you mentioned Fuentes. Where does he fit into all of this? Because there was speculation that he might have been a groyper. We don't have enough information to really know what his ideology was at all. But Fuentes seems to kind of be a little bit in the background here, but is a specter over the whole debate.
Yeah, I mean, I think Fuentes is going for, the past few months or few weeks has been going for kind of like almost like a more respectable approach. Like he's been really kind of dismissing. He's kind of having his like sister soldier moment to the right. I mean, he's saying like, you guys are crazy for believing these conspiracy theories. And in this case, he's saying, I'm not seeing evidence that Israel was behind it. So there's kind of some triangulation going on here. But, I think you hit on something broader, which is that you would think, given that the right would be really keyed up for this, for focusing on the shooter, but it seems like there's maybe not enough in the suspect's background to focus on yet. And as you said, they're making all these claims about the left, but we haven't seen, with the exception of George Soros, we haven't really seen like a proper noun. I mean, Kash Patel was just having his hearing. They're saying, oh, we're going to have to go after these leftist networks. They're not saying anything. I mean, I think a good heuristic here would be, with the Epstein files, where the right would always say, if there was something between Donald Trump and Epstein, Biden would have leaked it. And so we can just assume there's nothing. Well, I think in this case, I think if there was really a smoking gun or a real proof here that the suspect was really sort of liberally focused in a way that they could capitalize on, we would have seen it already.
I think that's right. And we were just covering this morning, just like how Patel is approaching this investigation. It's just a gift to the defense. I mean, I've never seen such a nakedly political and unprofessional investigation like this, and the rush to propagandize it feels very desperate to me. In a way that I think, broadly when we're talking about the different theories on the right, what has been the feeling about the free speech crackdown that is being promised by Trump, by Pam Bondi, by the widow of Charlie Kirk's wife, who is saying, widow of Charlie Kirk saying vengeance, vengeance, vengeance all over the place. They have no idea what's coming. To me, it feels very defensive, but also quite troubling, because you have the vice president and the president saying they're going to go after leftist groups and media organizations, which we would fall in there, Will. So something to monitor. Yeah.
I mean, going back to her speech after the assassination, I mean, it was notable to me that she said they, to the people who were behind this. I mean, there's really no evidence anyone at this point, but besides the suspect could have been behind it. You're right. The way the investigation is being handled is sort of like a way to court right-wing media has been very bizarre. It didn't get a lot of attention, but Dan Bongino went on Megyn Kelly yesterday, and it's really bizarre. I mean, you can get this sense that sort of his podcaster instincts are winning out over his deputy director of the FBI instincts, because she'll say things like, well, can you just confirm the suspect's roommate's name for us? And he goes, okay, I guess I'll do it.
Yeah.
Which in what situation would an FBI official, you have the roommate supposedly who is not involved, is cooperating, is just, I'll put the name out since, everyone is talking about it. It's really strange, and sort of talking about the conditions of the suspect's jail. But getting back to the free speech thing you mentioned, it's very strange. I mean, obviously, Pam Bondi has been facing a lot of backlash today for saying, we're going to have to crack down on hate speech. But more broadly, I mean, the right seems very comfortable with a lot of the way the rest of this has been phrased about, we're going to go after these networks, people who are calling us Nazis, we're going to go after them. I mean, things that are clearly illegal. And then, also, things that would otherwise be illegal, like, the administration's trial balloon about banning trans people from having guns. I think Pam Bondi's mistake was phrasing it in sort of a liberal coded way about hate speech. I saw one guy who's kind of a Maha figure say, we don't want hate speech crackdowns. We want purges. We want roundups. So it's not like these people are really that concerned about this kind of incipient fascism. I think that it's only because they've been taught for so long to be concerned about hate speech crackdowns that this is what set them off.
Yeah. Do we have that actually? Number 8 here. It might be a good idea to the Pam Bondi on, or maybe it's I'm sorry, what's the number? The one with Katie Miller? Is this the right
yes.
one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This was the. Sorry, guys, I'm trying to find this number. 11? Okay, yeah, let's do 11 here. So you referenced this, Will. Wanted to just play this for the audience. This is Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, on Katie Miller's podcast. For those that do not know, Katie Miller is the wife of Stephen Miller, who there was an article in the Rolling Stone over the weekend that basically shows he's functioning as the president, Stephen Miller. Trump is so lazy and is outsourcing essentially everything to him. So they have this podcast that no one watches, and I look at the views. No one's watching this, but it's all over the news, right? It's just there as
for them to clip.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's just a propaganda outfit. It's not like Katie Miller has great charisma, as you're about to see.
Only 2,000 views in a day.
Exactly. With the Attorney General on this
and
podcast.
That's like the highest profile interview she's done. Yeah.
Exactly. This was the headline coming out of this because, as you mentioned, Will, she made these comments about hate speech that she had to walk back this morning.
Especially with kids. It's a lot of work to show up to a college campus, right? For so long, colleges allowed, when a conservative would go on campus, right, they go with all this police and security. These universities are complicit in allowing conservatives to be harassed on campus. And what happens when you allow a university to harass conservatives and don't expel or don't take an action is what happened last week.
It is, and on a broader level, the anti-Semitism, what's been happening at college campuses around this country is disgusting, it's despicable, and we've been fighting that. We've been fighting these universities left and right, and we're not going to stop. There's free speech, and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything. And that's across the aisle. I mean, look what happened. Think about Josh Shapiro. What happened to Governor Shapiro? I talked to Josh multiple times. Democrat governor, Jewish. They firebombed his house.
All right, we got it.
His wife
I just want, first of all, the pandering there to Katie Miller, who is a Zionist Jew herself, as well as her husband Stephen, seems pretty clear there. I don't, and the way to make it bipartisan by bringing in Josh Shapiro. Oh, now you're concerned about violence against Democrats when it can be used as a propaganda outfit, because they know right now, of course, the pro-Palestine movement is centered, at least in terms of activist groups. It's on the left. You might have some like anti-Semitic, anti-Israel voices on the right, but they're not really in the organizing movement. So this is a way just to further go after the left, bringing that in there. But she's lying. Hate speech, you cannot. This has been delineated over and over again in the Supreme Court. I think Oliver Wendell Holmes had it, basically said this in the 1920s, something like that, where hate speech, it's protected until it crosses a specific line. But this was her statement walking it back today because, as you mentioned, Will, this is an issue constitutionally. Hate speech that crosses the line into threats of violence is not protected by the First Amendment, she says. It's a crime. Well, that's not what you said there.
That's called making a threat.
hate speech is not a concept that exists in First Amendment kind of case law and jurisprudence. And this has already been discussed. We can take that down. Laid out in our law that, incitement and harassment and that kind of thing, that's illegal. but hate speech actually is protected.
Right. I mean, you can see she's walking it back there. I mean, there was a huge explosion from the right. People were saying, particularly, I thought it was interesting that Turning Point USA people were saying, she should resign, be fired. So they don't like the hate speech enough. And I would say they also didn't like when she said that that if you run an Office Max or something and you refuse to print a Charlie Kirk memorial sign, that the Justice Department will come after you, which is very reminiscent of baking the cake for the gay wedding from their point of view. So, it on the other hand, there's been a lot of backlash and she's backtracked, but Trump backed her up today. I mean, in a gaggle, he said, I believe to Jonathan Karl from ABC, he was asked, what do you think about Pam Bondi saying she'll go after people? And he says, well, maybe she'll come after you, Jonathan Karl, if you keep it up.
Because you're a hater too. You do hate speech. You hate on me. That's what they mean by hate speech. They mean criticizing conservatives. Trump said it the other day. You call us Nazis. That's hate speech. Is it? Or is it an accurate portrayal of your freaking ideology?
Yeah, I mean, it's getting very sinister. And like I said, I mean, it seems like the White House is sticking with her. I thought it was notable that Laura Loomer, who is in some ways sort of a proxy for the White House as well. I mean, she hates Pam Bondi's guts. And she was out today saying, well, I think Pam Bondi made some good points. So I think it's clear the talking points win out. There was this initial kind of complaining from the right-wing influencers, but now I think they've been reined in and maybe they're going to run with this hate speech thing.
So yeah, lastly then, Will, where do you see that going? Even when we have some of the more high-profile conservative, I guess, online podcast influencer space being a little bit queasy about this explicit war on free speech, it seems like at least in the institutions of power, they're going to have the backing of the Republican Party and clearly the White House for this, attack on the First Amendment over Charlie Kirk's killing.
It's difficult to know because they haven't, with the exception of George Soros, they haven't really said anyone or that they'll be pursuing. But I think it's notable. I mean, J.D. Vance was going wild yesterday, mad about this Nation article that was critical of Charlie Kirk's legacy, and saying, we got to go after the people who are funding this. I mean, that's obviously protected free speech. And so I think Kash Patel was talking at his hearing about pursuing the money. So it seems like a very Viktor Orban type thing of pursuing, essentially the funders of liberal activism.
Well, didn't
Elon already do that with Doge?
Yeah, there are fewer. It's easier because it's just the entire right-wing media apparatus is funded by billionaires. So it's a lot easier to find liberal groups to attack in that way. It's horrible, but really appreciate your time today, Will Sommer. I also want to say you have a great book we interviewed you for in the past if people want to check out your work on QAnon. Trust the Plan, The Rise of QAnon and the Conspiracy That Unhinged America. If you want like a text that gives you a sense of the intellectual undergirding of our FBI director and what he really studied before coming into power. And of course, check out the Bulwark and Will's work over there at False Flag, the newsletter as a part of the Bulwark. Will, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.